I feel honored to have been invited to give these opening remarks. I am very happy to be with you again this morning at this auspicious CEO Governance and Leadership Forum. My first since I assumed office in April 2020, that is Dr. Kariuki, at the start of the unprecedented COVID-19 crisis, which has impacted utilities in very significant ways that we will be discussing today. For example, due to lockdowns, travel bans, and work from home policies, I first met some of my managers and staff only last month. This is the first forum since 2019, and the theme, Revisiting APOA AFDB CEO Forums for Sustainable Utility Transformation, is very relevant to our development objectives and aspirations, as we saw during the interesting sessions we had yesterday. I extend thanks to DG Teller, the Secretariat, organizers, and our host, Senelec, and the Government of Senegal. The African Development Bank has been supporting African governments and their power utilities for over 5 decades and remains fully committed to the rapid development of the power sector across Africa. This forum provides a great opportunity for the bank to continue its dialogue with power sector leaders to discuss ways of improving utility and power sector performance and strengthen regional integration through our power pools, despite the ongoing energy, debt, health, climate change, food, security, and other crises. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we are here today because of the fruitful cooperation between APOA and the African Development Bank in this power sector. It should be noted that since the conception of the bank's New Deal for Energy in Africa in 2015 and the launch of the African Network of Centers of Excellence in Electricity, ANSI, project in February 2016, leadership seminars have been organized by APOA and the African Development Bank as part of the promotion of good governance best practices in the sector in general and utilities in particular. Allow me to highlight some. A seminar entitled APOA Days on Leadership and Strategic Governance was held in Abidjan in March 2020. A CEO forum on governance and the reduction of technical and commercial losses in African electricity companies was also held at the AFDB headquarters in Abidjan in November 2017. Yet another CEO forum on smart grid deployment, opportunities, challenges, and strategic options was held in Cairo in July 2018. The last CEO forum on the Africa Power Utility of the Future was held in Abidjan at the AFDB headquarters in March 2019. The recommendations of a joint study report titled Revisiting Reforms in the Power Sector in Africa were discussed. This included an overview of the status of structural reforms from 2008 to 2018, identification of trends, critical success factors, and lessons learned. The report also provided the future landscape utilities will have to operate in, given the impacts of climate change and disruptive technologies and business models. The consensus was that a second wave of power sector reforms will be required, focusing on improving operational efficiencies, good governance, regional power trade to ensure energy security, and building resilience to proactively minimize the impacts of climate change. That is the just energy transition plans we've been talking about. Our collaboration with APOA has been driven by the bank's Sustainable Utility Transformation, or SUT, agenda, which is an integral part of the New Deal on Energy for Africa. Our SUT agenda is based on 5 pillars. Number 1, improve sector governance. This includes leadership fora like today's session. The bank also uses its convening power and platforms to have the views of key policymakers such as energy and finance ministers to address priorities and clarify roles and responsibilities. Good governance best practices also extend to utility, power pool, and regulator boards of directors, management teams, project steering committees, and project implementation units. with a focus on achieving stipulated targets through performance-based contracts. Pillar number 2 is about least cost integrated resource planning, which we discussed yesterday. The idea here is to have agreement on one long-term, typically 20-year plan to identify supply requirements that will optimally meet forecast demand in of country or the regional power pool. In all cases, prioritizing local content utilization and renewable energy where feasible, with a view to accelerating achievement of the objectives of Continental Master Plan, the Africa Single Electricity Market that we talked about yesterday. The optimum size and sequencing of investment projects also must factor development of economic natural resource endowments such as gas, hydro, geothermal, wind and solar, and available financing, human resources and technical capacity. As discussed yesterday, these plans feed into just energy transition plans and must have realistic targets and flexibility and contingencies built into them to always ensure energy security. Pillar number 3 is about human capital development, making sure that the right numbers of people with the required skill sets are deployed at the right place and time across the power value chain and project cycle. The ANSI 1.0 project, which is financed by AFDB and Agence Française de Développement AFD, has trained over 6,000 utility technicians, with 16% of them being women, and demonstrated very good results. A feasibility study and business plan are being used to mobilize resources for expansion of ANSI 1.0 to address gender, climate change, and energy efficiency priorities. That is ANSI 2.0. Pillar number 4 is about sector reforms and financial viability. We need to adopt the above mentioned lessons learned from the first wave of structural reforms in the design and implementation of the second wave of power sector reforms that will create the utilities of the future. The past is no longer a good predictor of the future, and we must recognize this. For example, whereas the independent power model has been proven, IPPs, with mixed results, there needs to be a focus on transmission backbones and interconnectors to optimize investments and facilitate mutually beneficial regional power trade. In this regard, the bank is promoting the first public-private partnerships in transmission. The bank has also supported cost of supply studies in several countries like Lesotho and Zambia, and advocates for regular reviews of tariff policy regimes, implementation of full cost reflective tariffs for commercially viable activities, and informed multi-year tariff transition plans with smart subsidies for non-commercially viable activities to ensure affordability and sustainability. The last pillar is about smart partnerships and performance monitoring. This involves leveraging the bank and APOA networks and strategic partnerships and platforms to improve power sector performance across Africa. A good example is the development of the Utility Performance and Behavior in Electricity in Africa platform today, otherwise known as UPBIT. This has been developed in collaboration with the World Bank to harmonize data collection standards and facilitate transparent utility performance benchmarking. Phase 1 involved over 70 utilities in 45 countries, and the reports, findings, and database are now accessible and have been presented to utility CEOs at various fora. From last October at SALI, AEF in London, and here again. And the DG, I'm sure, is giving the links to all of you. Workshops to validate phase 2 of UPBIT, covering the period 2019 and 2020, will be held in the near future. Another example is the bank's annual Electricity Regulatory Index report, which commenced in 2018. A presentation of our ERI initiative and collaboration opportunities will be presented later this afternoon from 3.
Monsieur le directeur général des institutions, Monsieur le directeur général de l'ASEA, Monsieur le directeur, Monsieur le secrétaire général de Sénélec, Mesdames, Messieurs les membres du comité de direction de Sénélec, Mesdames, Messieurs les experts chargés de mission, Mesdames, Messieurs, en vos rangs, grâce et titres ou protocole confondus. C'est un honneur pour moi de lancer le forum des directeurs généraux de sociétés d'électricité dans le sillage de la cérémonie officielle d'ouverture du 20e congrès et cinquantenaire de l'ASEA. Je le fais en saluant la présence de la Banque africaine de développement qui soutient abondamment le secteur de l'électricité dans le continent. Le dessein de ce séminaire est de créer une plateforme d'échange appropriée pour les bonnes pratiques, les dernières tendances et les meilleures orientations entre les directeurs généraux des sociétés d'électricité et les partenaires au développement. En d'autres termes, entre nos sociétés et les institutions que vous représentez. La dernière réunion du Forum des PDG tenue à Abidjan au mois de mars 2019, en présence de la Banque africaine de développement, de l'Agence française de développement, partenaire privilégié des sociétés d'électricité, avait été gouvernée par le même état d'esprit. À sa conclusion, comme vous l'avez rappelé, M. Baldé, des résultats quelle place et comment on pourra bien insérer le privé dans ce segment important pour la qualité de service. Une chose est sûre, mesdames et messieurs, nous avons de grandes marges de coopération entre nous et devant nous. Et les enjeux et défis auxquels nous faisons face ont suffisamment de similitudes qu'ils nous imposent une approche coordonnée et harmonisée et multiplient les perspectives de développement du secteur électrique continental. Et c'est justement l'engagement solennel d'une organisation comme l'ASEA. Les leaders que nous sommes doivent intégrer ce rationnel dans leur raisonnement et leur approche stratégique. Et cette rencontre de Dakar doit se dérouler dans cet esprit. Nous attendons de cette rencontre et des travaux prévus qu'il soit un terreau de réflexion, de propositions, de recommandations et de plans d'action pour nos sociétés d'électricité et nos partenaires au développement. Qu'il soit aussi une préparation de ces derniers à mieux s'armer face aux risques et incertitudes qui entourent l'économie de notre secteur et de nos sociétés d'électricité. C'est de cette manière que nous pourrons rester sur le bon chemin de la pérennité, de la performance et la qualité du service public de l'électricité dans nos pays respectifs. Je l'ai évoqué au début de mes propos et je les réitère. Nos partenaires techniques et financiers méritent toute notre gratitude parce que nous sommes bien conscients de leur apport dans notre